welcome to the Marley Bird YouTube channel, brought to you by Red Heart Yarns. In this video, I'm going to show you how to make the Textured Stripes Super Scarf. Now, super scarves are all the rage this season, so if you want to be on trend and add a little spice to your old wardrobe, this is the perfect project. This super scarf is made to be 90 inches long, which means you can wrap it around your neck a couple times and still have room for it to flow and bounce and flounce around you. Now, for this pattern, all you need to do is go to redheart.com, where you will find it for free. There is a link to the pattern right down there in the video notes, so you don't have to go searching for it. And while you're down there, please smash that like button, as my kids say, so that people know you enjoyed today's video. Now, go ahead, get this pattern, grab your materials, and I'm going to show you how to make this really great, trendy, and textured super scarf. Before we jump into the pattern, I want us to take a look at the finished sample. We can see down here that we begin with some garter stitch, which is really simple and fun and easy to make, right? And then we jump into stockinette. And stockinette knit back and forth is knit one row and then purl one row. But because stockinette naturally curls on itself, it's important that we balance out the stockinette with some other stitches. You can see that beyond the stockinette, we have this really great textured stitch here. And this is created by slipping stitches purlwise with the yarn and back. So I'm going to show you how to create this really great textured stitch that really allows the pattern to highlight the yarn, and it gives a really great look to this super scarf. Once you have completed this section, you will then move on to stockinette and then go back to a section just like this, so on and so forth, and then you'll end once again with garter stitch. So all in all, you really do only have to know how to knit and purl, cast on and bind off. I'm just going to show you a few tricks along the way on slipping stitches, that way you can get this really great textured stitch. This pattern begins by casting on 32 stitches. So I am going to guesstimate about how long I want a tail for a long tail cast on and 32 stitches. Once I've reached my guesstimated amount, I can place a slip knot at that point in my yarn. So once I have the slip knot, let's put that directly onto my needle and do a long tail cast on. I will show you how to do a long tail cast on by using both hands for the movement. Let me show you how this works. First off, we are going to grab the tail just like this, and so with our thumb, we're going to scoop around, okay? With our right hand, go ahead and grab your yarn as you would if you were going to throw your yarn, okay? So this is where we are. All I need to do now is I'm going to go up my thumb, and I will go around my needle with my right hand and then have my needle pop through my thumb and off. Let's do that again. I'm going to scoop with my thumb, go up my thumb, around my needle, out my thumb, and off. That's 3 stitches. Scoop, up, around, out, off. You want to cast on a total of 32 stitches. Once you have 32 stitches, it's time to jump in the pattern, which states that we need to knit 5 rows. So we will simply knit into these stitches. You push up a stitch close to the tip of your needle. Going from left to right, we'll go into the left, go through that stitch, yarn over our right hand needle, come out that stitch and off. Into the next stitch, around the needle, out that stitch, and off. Into the stitch, around the needle, out the stitch, and off. Doesn't this look really similar to how we just cast on? Imagine the left-hand needle is your thumb. So if this were my thumb, we went up the thumb, around the needle, out the stitch, and off. See how it's the same movement? Pretty nifty how that works out, huh? Go ahead and knit your 5 rows of garter stitch. You can see here that I've jumped ahead and I finished my 5 rows of garter stitch, and I decided to place a marker on what I will consider to be the right side. I want to be able to know which is going to be my right side. It will help me later on as I'm trying to distinguish what pattern I'm on. Once I finished the 5 rows of garter stitch, it was time to do row 1. And row 1 was knit another row. That will create our first knit side of our stockinette. The next row, row 2, was to purl back, and I've done that as well. And you can see as I open this up how I'm starting to get my stockinette stitch. Now the reason I've stopped at this point is because I came across a knot in my yarn, and I wanted to stop and show you that if you come across a knot in your yarn, it's best to go ahead and tink back so that you're at the start of the row, cut that knot, and then rejoin your yarn so that way you don't have any knots in the middle of your work. Knots happen, you guys. As yarn is getting made, knots are going to be created. It's not common to have more than 2 knots in a skein of yarn. So if you have more than 2 knots, there's a problem. But if you have 1 or 2, that's perfectly normal. So don't fret about it. And now you know how to handle that. I can pick up my work now, and you will also notice I am on circular needles. And I'm using my circular needles as straight needles. The reason I'm using these is because I find it easier on my wrists to use circular needles instead of straight. And I wanted to show you how you can use circulars instead of straights to complete this project. It's time for me to go ahead and move on to row 3, which is just a repeat of row 1 and 2. So if I'm going to repeat rows 1 and 2, all that means is I'm going to do some stockinette, right? So if I were to get lost, all I have to know is that if I'm looking at knits, I'm going to knit them. If I'm looking at purls, I'm going to purl them. The other little trick I have here is that with my stitch marker here on the right side, I know that if I pick up my work and it's in my left hand and I'm looking at my stitch marker, I am also on my right side and I will be knitting because I will knit every time I'm on the right side. Let me show you how to knit holding the yarn in your left hand this time. The designer suggests that the first stitch of every row you slip as if to purl, so I will go into that stitch and slip it off as if to purl. Now it's time to knit. Simply go into the stitch, yarn over my right hand needle, come out the stitch and off. It's the same motion as when I throw my yarn, where I hold my yarn in my right hand. It's just a matter of me holding my yarn in my left hand. Into the stitch, around my needle, out and off. In, around, out, off. When I get to that last stitch of the row, I'm simply going to knit it through the back leg. Let me get to the last stitch and I'll show you how to do that. I'm to the last stitch and it's time for me to knit the stitch through the back leg, so I simply go into the back leg of the stitch and knit it as usual, okay? What that's going to do, by slipping the first stitch and knitting the last stitch through the back leg, it will make a nice clean edge on my scarf. So that way as I wear it around my neck, I won't have any raggedy edges going on. Start every row with the slip as if to purl. So slip your stitch as if to purl. Make sure you move your yarn between your needles before you begin to purl the next stitch. And then going from right to left with your right hand needle, go into the next stitch. Yarn over your right hand needle, and then we're going to take that yarn over directly out that stitch and off. In, around, out, off. In, around, out, off. In, around, out, off. In, around, out, off. Let me show you how to do it holding the yarn in your left hand in case you're a continental purler. My yarn's still in front of my needles. I go into the stitch, around, out, off. In, around, out, off. In, around, out, off. When you get to the end of the purl row, don't forget to knit the last stitch through the back leg. So move the yarn between the needles so it's in the back, and then knit the last stitch through the back leg. So the very last stitch will be knit. That gives you this really great garter edge. Continue repeating rows 1 and 2 through row 12. And then for row 13, you'll complete 1 knit row. Then it's time to jump into the slip stitch pattern. Once you finish row 13, it's time to start row 14. And you'll notice you're looking at the back side of your work. Now, maintaining our slip stitch on the very first stitch and our knit stitch on the very last stitch, this is how we're going to work our pattern. Let's go ahead and slip our first stitch just like we normally would, and then we'll jump into the pattern, which states we need to knit one stitch. This is our repeat, okay? So we'll knit one, and then we slip one with the yarn in back, meaning we don't move it in front, we don't do anything, we leave the yarn in back. Then we knit the next stitch, which is going to have this yarn travel beyond that stitch right there, and knit the next one, and then slip one, and then knit one. We will do this all the way down until we have 2 knit stitches, remembering that our very last stitch we will knit through the back leg. So the pattern states to do this down to where you have 2 knit stitches, when in reality it's going to be down to the last 3 stitches, because remember the very last stitch we're going to knit through the back leg to get that really great edge. Let me show you some more how this works. I've just knit a stitch, so I slip one and then I knit one. I slip one and then I knit one. What this is doing is by having the yarn travel along the back of my work here, I'm creating this really cool effect on the stitch, and it creates a great deal of texture, and it really lets the yarn become the highlight of the piece. It also makes it so that our stockinette won't curl on us. It's going to be a really beautiful stitch pattern for us. Now, as I'm slipping every other stitch and knitting the next stitch, I get into a sort of rhythm here. You'll find that you get the same way. And I have to often stop and check myself to make sure that I'm not accidentally knitting 2 in a row. Now, here's where I mentioned that I'm to my last 3 stitches. I just slipped one, and so I will knit the next 2, and then my last stitch here, I will knit it through the back leg to maintain that nice edge that we've been working on. I turn my work, and it's time to move on to row 15, which is simply just knit. And I will knit those slip stitches just like normal, okay? So, maintaining our pattern, I'm going to slip the first stitch and then just knit all the way down the row. As I come to a stitch that was slipped, you can tell because you'll see the yarn just laying right there in front of the stitch. Ignore that yarn and just knit the next stitch. Some of you who are brand new knitters will look at this and say, wait a minute, I've had mistakes like this before. But this time we're doing this on purpose. This is called slip stitch patterning. I will just knit all the way down this row, and then I'm ready to jump into my slip stitch pattern yet again. At the end of my row, I turn my work and I'm ready to start row 16, which has me start a little bit different than the way I started on row 14. And what this will do is offset that slip stitches. So I'll get a nice cool diagonal effect, okay? Maintaining our pattern here, we will slip the first stitch and now jump into our row 16 instructions, which state we need to knit 2. So knit 1, knit 2, and now I jump in to my slip 1, knit 1, slip 1, knit 1, and my yarn is always in back. I'm slipping as if to purl, meaning I'm putting my right hand needle into the stitch as if I was purling it. So I go in as if to purl, slip it, and then I knit the next stitch. Slip 1, knit 1, slip 1, knit 1. Here at the end of the row, I'm to my 3 stitches, and I can slip 1, knit 1, and then knit my last stitch through the back leg just like I normally do. Now, if I wanted to put a stitch marker before that last stitch and after this first stitch, I could do that. So that way it reminds me, slip this first stitch or knit that last stitch through the back leg, but that's going to be up to you. You can totally add stitch markers to remind you how to do that, okay? As I turn my work here, you will begin to see the stitch pattern as it begins to present itself. With all of those slip stitches, you have the corresponding yarn that's traveling across it on the front side, and that gives us that really cool look right there and allows the yarn to really show off. For rows 17 through 40, you will repeat rows 13 through 16 to create this really great slip stitch pattern. Once you've reached row 40, it's time to start over again. You will repeat rows 1 through 40 for a total of 9 or 11 times, depending on how long you want your scarf to be. Then, to finish it off, you'll repeat rows 1 and 2 once, and then knit 6 rows and bind off. Then your scarf is complete. As you weave in your ends, make sure you weave them in on the wrong side of your work, so that way they don't show through on the right side, and you will have a really great super scarf. And you can see right here, those are the floats that were created when these stitches were slipped as this stitch pattern was created. You can tell on the edges that it's a really nice clean edge, and that's because of the way we started and ended each row. It's just a really great way to really make your scarf lay nice and flat. Now, I can't wait to see all of these super scarves out there in the wild. If you want to take a picture of you wearing yours and share it with me on Facebook or Twitter, I would love that. Use the hashtag superscarf so that way I'm sure to see it, okay? If you liked today's video, make sure you hit subscribe so you're up to date whenever there's a new video released right here on the Marley Bird YouTube channel. And make sure you smash that like button, as my kids say. I'm Marley Bird, proud spokesperson for Red Heart Yarns, and I will talk to you again soon. Thanks! Looking for more Marley Bird? Don't worry, I've got you covered. Click right down there and you will find more videos just like this teaching you how to knit or crochet, all brought to you by Red Heart Yarns. Go ahead, click away. Don't be shy. Don't forget to smash that like button.